Thanks for joining us on our Pines and Plains Library's YouTube channel. We're going to interview John Wesley Anderson. We're going to talk about his Zach Box books today. He has a wonderful blend. They're almost a historical fiction, sci-fi kind of. It's just a really interesting blend, and he's going to walk us through how he wrote that and hopefully encourage young writers and give them some tools in their belt on how to write a really well-developed story with excellent characters and kind of go through the whole process. He's also got a study guide that accompanies his Zach Box book. So that might work for some homeschoolers, a teenage book club. A lot of interesting things that have gotten on. His brain is very interesting, so it's a great interview. I hope you guys enjoy watching it. Leave us a comment. Let us know if there's an author that you would like to hear from, that we could reach out and interview them for you. We'd love to do that. We want to connect with our patrons, so let us know. Send us a clip or a comment. All right. Oh, and don't forget, hit subscribe.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so we are back. We talked yesterday about your prayer trees, the culturally modified trees, and I is so inspired. I asked you, and here we are again. We're going to talk about another book. So, John Anderson, we're here with you again, and I just want to reiterate. Yesterday we kind of covered it into the video again a little bit, but you have two focuses. You want to honor the past and you want to inspire the future. And I think that's absolutely wonderful. So you've got some nonfiction books and some fiction books and 6 published books.
Right.
And soon to be, there's another one coming out in the spring.
Right.
And then one of your books we're going to talk about today is the first, and it will have some follow-on buddies, right? So you've got a lot of things going. How long does it take you to write a book? Because you've done this a couple times now.
Right. It takes me about a year. I didn't realize it was going to be that long of a process. I can probably knock one out in about 10 months, but then what happens is you send it off to the editors and the proof copy, and so each step, delays it a little longer. So I'd originally planned to knock out one a year, but I'm not quite at that speed. So maybe I'll get faster.
Yeah. So do you do traveling and research and kind of
I,
looking into the book?
I do, and I build in my travel in for multiple books. So instead of just focusing on one book, I have 17 more books coming out besides the 7 that I've already written and that are either published or in the hands of the publisher. So the next 17, I already have a general idea of each one. And so there's 5 books in the science fiction Zach Box Saucer series. So I know where they take place and generally who's involved in the characters. So as I'm doing my field research, I can also go to those places. For example, one of the places I've wanted to go to for half a century was Chaco Canyon in northern New Mexico. Have you ever been there?
Mm-mm.
Put it on your list. I'm sure you've seen pictures of it, the ancient ruins of Chaco, and they started building there, some of the Mayan in 900 AD, and then they mysteriously leave about 1280 AD. And there's just some wonderful connections there with our past. But one of the most fascinating features is one of the largest kivas there, Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon, has 7 kivas shaped like the Pleiades star cluster. So
Oh, wow.
when I was there, to write this book that we're going to talk about today, Zach Box and the Pearls of Pleiades, I was only able to visit there virtually. So book 2 has a character who's a Navajo boy who's 16, and he's from that area. And so his ancestors were some of the builders of
Mhm.
Chaco Canyon. So this September, just a couple months ago, I had the privilege of going with 12 friends and a Ute tribal elder from the Southern Ute Reservation. And so there were 13 of us that went and spent 3 days at Chaco Canyon with a tribal elder. And so while I was there, we were talking about Native American trees, sacred places, but I was also focused in on things for my book 2 in the Zach Box Saucer series. So they kind of overlap.
Neat, neat, neat. Okay, so you've started talking about the Zach box. So Zach box, and then what's the exact title? Can you
Uh,
hold it up again?
I can, and it is titled Zach Box and the Pearls of Pleiades.
Nice, which is the star cluster.
It is, and
Nice.
that
So
start
this is science fiction,
correct.
but it has a study guide to go with it.
It does. I'm glad you brought
Okay.
that up. It's a STEM study guide for science, technology, engineering,
Uh-huh.
and math. And so it's purposely designed so it's a young adult,
Hmm.
YA 13 to 18 age group. But where I think the real sweet spot is grades 10 through 12. About the time someone's starting to look at which college they may want to go to, or a career field or a vocational field that they're interested in. And so this book kind of helps open up some ideas, for them to explore, particularly in those areas, the science, technology, engineering, and math.
Nice, nice. Okay. Well, that's mainly what got me excited. I know some of our patrons already kind of have me pegged as I work with the kids and I try and help them figure out what they want to do when they grow up. And sometimes it's college and sometimes it's not. But the process of, what do I like? Do I want to work with my hands? Do I want to use my head? What? And so when we got to talking, and I really wanted to learn more about this book. So I will just turn it over to you. I understand you have a presentation and I want to hear more about this book.
I do. Let me bring up these slides. And can you see? Let's see. I think they're popping up now. Can you see them okay, Becca?
Yep, I can.
And what I thought we'd do, excuse me, is I need to take a sip of tea here.
Oh, yeah.
What I thought we would do is go through the slides, and I'll stop at each one, and you can comment or ask questions. We'll get to the end, and then I thought what we'd do is pull up the STEM study guide just to show people what that looks like. Now, when I first wrote and published the Zach Box book, it came out July of this year, 2020, and the STEM study guide came out in, I think it was October of this year. So it hasn't been out very long. And I originally had planned it as an extension for a summer reading program for students and teachers. But with this COVID thing where we're all kind of, quarantined, and a lot of schools are, or online virtually, or for a home or in a hybrid. Um, uh, I think this book, particularly in those subjects, the science, technology, engineering, and math, I think they're going to be more than just a summer reading extension program. I'm hoping that it'll have that. So uh,
Right.
the
Well,
book,
and there's lots of moms and dads that are doing homeschool. And so I really liked this idea of, if you want to do it a summer, like a little perk to keep you going in the summer, or you want to make this a little unit of home study,
it,
it sounds great.
you're exactly right. And so it's kind of interwoven in there, along with one other thing I want to mention, and that is that this book and my the newest one that I'm launching on mid December, right for Christmas, Sherlock Holmes in Little London, 1896
Mm,
here. Um, what I've learned in writing the fiction is to use this hero's journey. It's a formula of writing that goes back 2,000 years. So there's a process, and I'll talk about that as we go through. So it's not just the science fiction. I kind of want to also weave in a little bit of the process of writing books, because now, you know, when so many of us are quarantined or whatever, is the perfect time if you've ever wanted to write a book and you're never too young or too old to start. And people who are interested, this is a framework on how to get started, but it's also a way of creating a new world or an alternate world. And it's your world, so you can make that world any way that you want it to. And so when I'm building these slides for each chapter of the book, I'm actually world building, and you can get as involved in that as you want to. And the more detailed that you can see your world visually, either in your mind or I use slides to supplement that, the easier it is to write that book. So we'll talk about that process of writing as we go through each of the slides too.
Okay. Yeah. So you're going to take us through your outlines.
Yes, this is my, probably everybody's familiar with a storyboard, you know, where you either write on a, you know, a whiteboard, or you take sticky notes and lay it out. And that works for some people better than others. What helps me is to have kind of the visual references, and what PowerPoint allows you to do is to or something.
Oh, there you go.
So anyway, here's the second slide, and I'm just throwing it out as, and again, kind of the idea of writing a book using the PowerPoint as your or electronic storyboard, where you can start framing things for discussion or for later. For example, you could even outline your book cover. So you have your titles and some images, and I'm using the idea of the Pleiades star cluster with the pearls embedded in them, but also gives me a chance to write my cover blurb, the back blurb on the book. And what that allows you to do is to start making, you know, some writing guides talk about writing your cover blurb first. It's kind of your elevator pitch, and to make sure you know what you're writing to keep you on track. So if nothing else, putting it together kind of as, you know, just a guide. And you also, you know, a lot of times will want some kind of a premise up front. And so my premise is, and this weaves into the opening, is for thousands of years, ancient man gazed up into the stars and dreamt of returning to Pleiades. And this rock art is really some fascinating rock art. So when you start studying Pleiades, and the earliest references to Pleiades as the star cluster, you immediately go to the Greek and the Roman, and they talk about the ancient Greeks referred to the seven Pleiades as the seven sisters. And there's a certain time in the spring where Venus, where we're at in the western horizon, is a crescent moon. You can see Venus, and then the seven sisters are lined off there. And 2,000 years ago, the Greeks referred to that period in time astrologically as Venus dancing with the seven sisters. And they're the ones who named each of the stars in the Pleiades star cluster. So that becomes important because each of the flying saucers that are going to be involved are from one of those seven sisters, one of the stars. So the I'm laughing at your cuckoo clock. That's
I know, I forgot to turn it off.
That sounded great. There'll probably be something you'll hear in my background here in a little bit.
Yeah.
My dog's sleeping in my chair right next to me, so hopefully he won't get upset.
Yeah, I've got an older dog right here sleeping next to me.
So the earliest reference that I could find anywhere about the Pleiades star cluster wasn't written. It was rock art, and it dates to 42,000 BC, and it's in a cave in an island west of Great Britain. Out in the ocean is this island with this cave. Now you have to use your imagination. Some people think it's just a decoration. Others say no. This is clearly the seven star cluster right here, the Pleiades. And this is a person who 44,000 years ago from today put their hand up there and painted around it. And how they did that was with a pigment that they would blow through a reed or maybe a hollow
Powder.
powder. Yeah, it gets picked up by their breath. And so they're painting on this rock an outline of their hand, but then they purposely have made these dots to represent. Again, some people say, it's just a design, it's just being pretty, but others will say, no, this is the Pleiades star cluster. So it almost is a reference that here am I, and I want to return to the Pleiades. So that reference about early man returning to the Pleiades. I also am fascinated with this bronze sky disk, and it was dated at the beginning of the Bronze Age. So it's believed to be 1600 BC when it was created. And it's referred to as the Nebra sky disk. And it was found, this was fascinating, it was found by two treasure hunters who were digging on a mound in Europe, in Germany, and they're not supposed to be there. So they're illegally going out at night, and they're digging around this mound they think is a burial mound, and they find the Nebra sky disk resting on the chest of a man, a huge man, who was buried there in that mound almost 2,000 years earlier. And they steal the Nebra sky disk along with a bronze sword and some other artifacts, and they sell it on the black market. They get arrested, and during their prosecution, they agree to share where they recovered the Nebra sky disk. And so now the sky disk, it's about 10 or 12 inches in diameter, and they've built a museum there in Germany around just this sky disk. So it's a vast part of our history.
Neat.
Well, let me jump into chapter 1, and as you can see in the upper left,
Everybody knows, everybody's working from home. It's how it is. He wants to join in.
The FedEx delivery, so hopefully that you'll go away, or I'll go do something with him in a minute. Let me keep pressing away here. So in chapter 1, this is following the hero's journey. So if you're interested as a future writer or just fascinated with the subject, just go online, Google hero's journey. There's thousands of things out there, references to that that formula, this writing formula, where each chapter has a different theme, and they always start in the ordinary world. That's part of the process. So like Jason and the Argonauts, 2,000 years ago, it started with an ordinary world, and then there's a call to adventure. So we'll talk about that. This is one thing that I learned. So this was my rough draft and putting the slides together as they evolve to write each of the chapters. So I'm not forgetting something. So visually, I know these are the things on the right side of the slide that I'll want to incorporate. So the book starts here. Can you see my cursor okay? And so this outline is of Sleeping Ute Mountain, and it's on the Ute Mountain Ute reservations in the Four Corners of Colorado. And it's the profile of an Indian. Some say it's an Indian warrior. He's sleeping on his back, staring up to the heavens. This is his head. This is either his hair or his feathered war bonnet, but he has his arms crossed across his chest. And so this right here is the tip of his elbow. So he's got his arms crossed, and
doing the,
you can see it?
Yeah, I can see it. I can see the outline.
And so you have to kind of use your imagination. This is like his knee, and his feet are down here. These are his toes. So the sun is setting right behind Sleeping Ute Mountain. And when we were headed to the reservation, this was 3 years ago, and my friend is driving, and I saw the sun going down, and I said, stop, we got to get a picture of the sunset behind Sleeping Ute Mountain, because the next morning we were going to be here on top of the Sleeping Ute Mountain on the reservation, and we were being guided there by 3 elders, one from the Ute Mountain Ute, one from the Southern Ute Reservation in Durango, and we were meeting a 3rd Ute elder from Fort Duchesne in Utah. And so the book starts right here at this point, right below the elbow, a sacred place on Sleeping Ute Mountain. And when I was there 3 years ago, right at that very summit, I had the privilege of listening to the elders talk about the stories and when they were a little boy and the things that they remember and they experienced. And it was really a humbling experience. And, you know, I'm not Native American, I'm not Ute, but I had to kind of wonder as I'm watching and listening to these Ute elders, these men talk about their being, when they were little boys and growing up, when was the last time that a white person like me was standing on that sacred place with a Ute elder from the 3 different reservations? It was really a unique experience, and that's where I start this book off. So Zach Box, who loves running and track, and the storyline is that Zach's this is where the bullets come in handy. So Zach is half Ute. His father is Ute. His father's a firefighter, works at the Air Force Academy. And in the summers, Zach spends the summers with his great-grandfather, White Elk, on the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation because he's being raised by a single father. His mother, Leilani, was an Air Force Academy graduate, a pilot, and she dies in combat in the Middle East when Zach is 3. He's 15 and a half now. So he's raised by a single father, no siblings, and so his great-grandfather, White Elk, is very prominent in his life, and he's teaching him the old ways, the indigenous ways. So it starts out on the morning of the summer solstice, and Zach is training to run the Pikes Peak Marathon. And so there's the interest that he has, like a lot of 15-year-olds, boys especially, with sports, and he's looking forward to getting a driver's license. He's 15 and a half, so in Colorado, you have to be 15 and a half, get your learner's permit, 16 to become a licensed driver. And he's also starting to be interested in girls and dating and those kinds of things that happen when you're in, middle school going into high school. So this is chapter 2. I should take a breath and ask if you have any questions on chapter 1, Becca, or comments.
So this is what you wrote down when you were planning out this book.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And so you said you have 17 books in the mix.
Right.
You have something like this for each book that you've got kind of planned.
Not as detailed, but
okay.
So when I start into the book and actually doing the writing, I think I only have 3 outlines visually, storybook starting to come together, because it takes a lot of time to build. And sometimes as you're writing the chapter, you'll introduce a chapter in chapter 5, and you go, wait a minute, I've got to introduce this character much earlier, or I have to put in a red herring, or I have to do something, in one of the previous chapters. So what this allows you to do is to take, chapters out, move things around. Well, you may start off and think, well, this is a great, closing paragraph. And then you realize, wait a minute, there's another close. So this isn't a closing paragraph. It needs to be somewhere early in the book. It also allows you to keep track of little details. Some people keep like a journal or handwritten notes or sticky notes. I like to do it this way because it allows me to have a place to go back to. So I may want to go back and say, and again, this is a draft, so it evolves once you get into your proofreading. And I don't go back and fix everything at the beginning, but it allows me to go back and find little information, like Arjun, who is 17 and he's attending the School of Mines. Arjun is Basu is his last name, and it's a Bengali name, and so I'm creating that character and getting into a little bit of their history and their culture. What is the meaning of his name, Basu? It's Sanskrit that means wealth, gem, and radiance, and he's attending the School of Mines here in Colorado. So
which for people who are not familiar, that is a high level school.
Yes, yeah.
So
So he,
you're just by you putting that, you are telling us a lot about your character.
you're right. And
Yeah.
visually, this is where I'm keeping track and seeing. Okay, now I need to expand a little bit on Arjun, who has a scholarship to attend the School of Mines.
Oh.
It only pays for books and tuition. So he has to get a part-time job. So he's in Golden and he's trying to find a part-time job, and he's a geologist, real bright guy. And so he ends up getting a part-time job at the USGS, the U.S. Geological Service, a federal position in Boulder, is the earthquake. Let's see, awareness. I'm getting the term wrong. Um, uh, it's to predict earthquakes and to measure earthquakes. And so he's working part time, and he starts picking up these earthquake anomalies. And so he's tracking those, and then he's so smart, he's able to model and simulate the earthquakes, and he realizes there's a predictability to this. And so it means it's not random. And he comes up with the idea that they're binary, they're being created. And he brings that to his supervisor, who thinks, this is just nuts. This is just crazy. And but he is also aware that in his his homeland of India, that the summer solstice is also sacred. He also is aware. He drives a Subaru. Do you drive a Subaru, Beckett, or is anybody in your family?
No, I don't.
Yeah, well, probably everybody has seen this symbol, either, on a
Mhm.
commercial, or if you drive a Subaru on your horn button or whatever. But what people don't realize is this is the Pleiades star cluster. And if you count them, you say, wait a minute, there's only 6 stars there. And that's true. The 7th star, Merope, is so hard to see that it doesn't appear on the Subaru star cluster. So
Huh.
Japan, the Pleiades had a very prominent role in that culture too, which becomes important as we introduce the other characters.
Hmm.
On to the next chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Chapter 3. There's always a call to adventure in the hero's journey, and one thing I should point out here and this allows you to track when and where. So you can say, this is going to happen the next day. What's the date? And when I was first writing the book and outlining it, I was using star dates because I thought that's really a cool dating system way to date, especially when you get in outer space and you're not, here on Earth. So, the day, is relative. So
Hmm.
in my science fiction book, my publisher picked up on that, and he says, wait a minute, John. He said, Stardate looks like it might be infringing on copyright of, the Star Trek series. He said, you need to come up with a new date, a new system. And you think, well, that ought to be simple enough. How hard is it to come up with a new calendar? But it turns out that it's really not that simple. And so when the book actually um, evolved into getting into print, I had to come up with a new dating system. So what we used, so the book starts out on July 21st, June 21st, which is the summer solstice, at 10:07 hours Mountain Daylight Savings Time, our time, but it has an astrodate of 11/062.1, which is the day of the summer solstice. So as we're progressing through the story, we'll end up with a flying saucer and going to Pleiades in traveling at extraordinary speeds. But one thing that physicists have confirmed, when we're traveling in outer space and going at great speeds, time slows down. Well, what that
Hmm.
means is time on Earth stays the same, time's relative. And so the further that you go out and the faster you go, the slower you're going. So when Zach is 15 and a half when he leaves, when they come back, almost 9 months have transpired, but 3 years have passed on Earth. And so one of the
Oh,
effects
wow.
is Zach has a 6-month-old puppy who he names Mr. Bojangles. That's one of his favorite songs with his mother and memories. So Bo is his puppy. So when he comes back, you'll see at the end that Bo is now 3 years old. He's a full-grown dog, and everybody else has aged 3 years except the crew, who've only aged less than a year. So it's a way of tracking that the Astra date. So that's a little bit of a shift here. So so the bullets allow me to make sure in each chapter that I'm introducing the characters, like Saint Michael Sandoval. He has a call sign, Sandbox 2, which becomes important. Zach's call sign is Zachbox 1. Zach's real name or full name is Zachary, last name Box, B-O-X, which is a famous name, well respected within the Ute culture. So Zach Box gets paired to be his call sign. His mother's call sign was Sandbox 1. Her first name was Sandy. So his mother was part of the U.S. Air Force Pararescue Guardian Angels. This is their logo. They're called PJs for short, parajumpers, pararescue jumpers. So they're the ones who go in behind enemy lines and recover downed pilots and rescue people. Very heroic. And so she's the pilot of a helicopter that gets shot down on a rescue mission. And St. Michael's the only one to survive that. So he's important. And this is where at the Air Force Academy, where Zach's dad, Zeke Box, introduces Zach to St. Michael, who is here at the Air Force Academy. So as I'm writing that scene, I'm actually visually looking at what that chapel looks like, the stairs that lead up to it. It helps being inside, but if you haven't been inside, or if you're doing something like Notre Dame and you've never been there, you can pull that up and you can visually see, what it's like to walk down the aisles. And it makes the story that much more convincing, so much more believable. When I look out my window where my home office is, I can see the Air Force Academy in Pikes Peak, and I've been in the chapel many times. So it's easy, and I've been to graduation, so it's easy for me to visualize that and give more definition to those scenes. So if you write about something it's a little bit easier. I didn't know a lot about the PJs, so I had to learn more about what their missions were, when and where were they stationed. And I also at the bottom make reference to this tremor that happens on Independence Day, and I'm introducing this BBOT that I'll mention here in a little bit. Independence Day, these dates, they can happen at any time. I always try to anchor them into something of importance, like the solstice, because I can remember that, June 21st. Independence Day, everybody remembers July 4th, but it's also a recognition to what I think is one of the greatest movies ever made, Independence Day, with the aliens and all. So you can subtly bring those in, and it helps you remember that, so you're not just having a sterile date. It's independence and kind of that theme with the aliens wanting to come in and take over Earth, and kill us all off. That becomes part of the story. On chapter 4, in following the hero's journey, you almost always have the hero who's an unsuspecting hero. He's not planning, or she's not planning to do this. And so when the call adventure happens, almost without exception, there's a few exceptions, but rarely is there not a refusal of a call. And in Zach's case, when the flying saucer selects him to be the captain, he said, I can't fly a spaceship, a flying saucer. I don't even have a driver's license. I'm only 15. I'm going into the 10th grade. I can't do this. So that's his refusal. It's also important to build in your people, places, and events. And Becca, that goes back to honoring history. That's a collection of people, places, and events. So sometimes they overlap, and you can build again of what's an important place. And so Fibonacci's Diner becomes a very important place, and it anchors the location where Zach goes. Events happen, when people are in and out of there. One of the important people in Zach's life is Professor Lisa Fibonacci, and she's a professor at the Air Force Academy, physics professor, brilliant lady. and never married, and so her life has been teaching the cadets at the Air Force Academy. And when Zach's mother's killed, she ends up buying the townhome next to Zach's dad, and so she kind of helps raise him almost as a surrogate mother. When Zach's dad's on a 24-hour shift at the fire station, she'll either go there to sleep, at their house on the couch, or bring Zach into her place. So she's a very influential part of his life. The Fibonacci name, if you've not studied this is just extraordinarily fascinating. Are you familiar with the Fibonacci spiral?
I have been looking at them and I've seen them a lot, but I would love to hear more about them.
And the book gets into this, and this ties into on the STEM side, the mathematics, and it's just extraordinarily fascinating. And you've probably seen the spiral like in a seashell. Archaeologists, not archaeologists, architects have replicated this mathematical formula in some of the most beautiful structures in the world. Here's this spiral staircase. There's one in Santa Fe in the Inn of Loretto, and there's a scene where Professor Fibonacci takes Zach few years before this happens to see the miraculous staircase in Santa Fe. So again, if you haven't been to the Inn of Loretto and you haven't seen the miraculous staircase, put that on your to-do list on the way to Chaco Canyon. You can
I knew you were going to get that back in there.
So from the depth, I spent 10 years with Lockheed Martin and took an early retirement to do the writing and art and some other things. So when I was with Lockheed, when you walk into their main headquarters in Bethesda, Maryland, on the wall is a sign, big letters, and it says, "From the depths of the ocean to the far reaches of space." And that's where you'll find Lockheed Martin, but it's also where you'll find the Fibonacci spiral. So when you look at the spiral galaxies and the Milky Way and images in deep space, this formula repeats itself. It's a formula in nature that is very prevalent. When you look at the bottom of a pine cone from a ponderosa pine, Pines and Plains libraries, if you look at the bottom, it repeats this pattern. Sunflowers, many flowers of roses. That's just a fascinating subject. You could do a book just on the Fibonacci spiral, but all I'm trying to do is to introduce to the readers, especially with STEM, the importance of understanding the Fibonacci spiral, or at least being aware of it. I don't know if we'll ever understand it entirely, but this formula starts out at the very beginning with you have a 0, nothing, and then you have a 1, and the formula goes, you add 1 and 1 and you get 2, and then you add the next number. I mean, you add the last 2 numbers to get the next number. So you add 1 and 1 and you get 2. So the next number, so that's 2. The next number will be 3 in the sequence. The next one's 5, because you're adding 2 and 5 to get, 2 and 3 to get 5. The next number will be you're adding 3 and 5 and you're getting 8. The next number is you're adding 5 and 8 and you're getting 13. Then when you add 8 and 13, you get 21. You add 13 and 21, you get 34. And it goes on to infinity. And so that formula is how you can determine depths and distance and speed. And so I'm equating it to speed and calculating instead of just miles per hour. We're using Fibonacci numbers. And so that idea in mathematics is one that just opens up a whole universe for us that is just extraordinary to study.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me just glance at these bullets. So anyway, going back to Professor Fibonacci, she has this diner. Zach stops there. He loves to visit with her, and he's got a buddy who's the chef, Reggie. And so he's concerned that these earthquakes have happened. They think they must be intentional, and he's had an encounter with this orb. It's about an 8-inch floating orb, and it's called a Bee-Bot. And this is a character I created. So the bot is artificial. The bee is this orb. So together they become a Bee-Bot. So that's kind of like CP30, or some of the features, a little bit like ET, a little 3-foot tall character, but it's a combination of a natural sentient being and an advanced robot that comes together as an important role. So that's the Bee-Bot. So as Professor Fibonacci is talking to Zach, he talks about this encounter, and he says, "Please don't think I'm crazy." And she's talking to him and realizes that the Bee-Bot has selected him, and so now she has to introduce Zach to another main character who is Olaf Eriksson, and he's a 650-year-old Pleiadian, and he is the grandson of Leif Erikson, the Viking. So Pleiadians can live to be a long time, hundreds of years. They're huge. They're 7 or 8 feet tall, and there's a lot of references to them visiting Earth and being from the Pleiades. So I'm building on those kinds of scientific things, and then blending that with some real world things like the Fibonacci sequence, or things like the Stonehenge that everybody's familiar with in England. What you might be less familiar with is in Tikal, in South America, the Mayan culture built 7 pyramids, and they're lined exactly like the star cluster, the Pleiades. So they're replicated across the world. So the starship Electra is waiting for the captain and crew, and needs a young crew because they're going to be traveling great distances. So if you get an older crew, they may not live long enough, for decent travel. So that's why there's teenagers involved. And so one of my favorite scenes in the book is when Professor Fibonacci takes Zach in the diner, walks and says, I think it's time for you to meet Olaf Eriksson. So they're walking through the diner. They go to the back of the diner. He knows there's only 3 doors there. There's a door to the men's room on the left. On the right is the door to the women's restroom. But straight ahead it's marked janitor's closet. And so she walks him into the janitor's closet. He's standing there next to the mop and the pail in the janitor's closet. And she closes the door, and she takes hold of the mop handle. And he says, Professor Fibonacci, you may not realize this, but we're standing in your mop closet. And she smiles and says, you may want to hang on to something, dear. Things aren't always as they seem. So she pushes the mop handle, and it's an elevator, and it drops down 3 stories, and they go into this underground beneath the diner, this center for technology and it's CAT2, Center for the Advancement of Technology and Talent. So that becomes this underground complex. Is where he's going to meet the Pleiadian. He's going to see the starship Electra, who's waiting for the cruise. So there's an interaction with the starship and Zach that it's confirming this is going to be my pilot. So how are we doing? You okay?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. I like it.
Chapters, so we're not quite halfway, and I'll try to zip through these. And so interrupt me if you have any questions. So this all builds up to the STEM, and why this is so important to kind of get the foundation, and also lays the groundwork for books 2, 3, 4, and 5, yet to be written, by the way. So Zach meets Arjun Basu near the Air Force Academy, and he talks a little bit about how the Pleiades is called the Star of Fire in India, and drives him, because Zach doesn't have his license yet, to meet his mentor. And that's the theme with chapter 5 and the next step of the hero's journey, is they always mentor If it's fantasy, they may have a wizard or someone who teaches them. Sometimes they give them something, an amulet or a wand or something, to help them in their journeys, because you're going to need that. You might need a weapon, you might need something special. So Dr. Thurkel Bronsteed, who's a Danish-born archaeologist and world traveler, becomes Zach's mentor. And he's familiar with, he knows Zach's great-grandfather, White Elk. He's familiar with because he's traveled all the world, he's familiar with the Vikings being in North America long before Columbus got here. And he's in the mountains west of Denver. And there's a medicine wheel there. And that medicine wheel actually exists. It's in my first book that we talked about yesterday. And so he mentions that he and Professor Fibonacci, when they were younger, they found a second Nebra sky disk that's related to the Pleiades. So there's more than one of the sky disks. In chapter 6, this happens in the hero's journey. As they start off on the journey, you always have this little bit of safety net. You can look back, you can see the shore, you can always make your way back, but there's always a point of no return. And in the hero's journey, in the formula, you reach that point where you cross this threshold and there's no turning back. We can only go forward. We can't go back. And that happens with Zach and his crew as they are on outbound on Electra, and they're learning a little bit more about the other starships, the legends, and they're learning this from Dr. Bronstein, St. Michael, Professor Fibonacci. And one of the things that they have to do before they get to the Pleiades star cluster is they must rescue Jorvik Eriksson, who is Olaf's son, who was shot down by these nasty Centaurians from the Omega Centauri star cluster. So this star cluster exists. This is its number. And so these aliens who have captured or who shot down Jorvik, who is the Pleiadian who's on this distant moon of Jupiter. We'll get there in just a second. So they have to rescue him as part of the mission so that they can get to the Pleiades, because Jorvik has around his neck an amulet that has the dimensions and the directions of how to get there. So the rescue becomes imperative. But to do that, they have to travel there in the spaceship. So this slide also introduces the other 3 members of the crew and gives just a little thumbnail about them. John Paul von Braun, who's the chief engineer, he's 15, he's a prodigy from Germany. Many of you may recognize the last name von Braun. Werner von Braun, who was one of the Nazi collaborators who's rescued at the end of World War II. And he comes to the United States, with a number, I think there's several hundred German engineers and their families, and they end up starting or accelerating our space program here with NASA. Cadence Bahar is a medical doctor already at age 16. She's from South America, and I'm building in a little bit about their culture and their history, which builds that theme as we go along. So she enjoys dance, music, rhythm. That's important as we're learning more about the nature and science in the universe. And then the last one of my favorite, I love all my characters, but Anzu Gozen, she is really super special. She's a security officer. She's 15. She's Bushi class samurai. And I didn't know this until I started studying the samurai culture, but there were samurai women who fought along the men, and they were very fierce warriors. And I wanted to tie him back to Japan, back to the Pleiades with the Subaru, and tie into that culture. So the security officer is actually shorter than Zach Box, who's not real big, but she's extremely well trained in the martial arts, and as a samurai, a warrior, in using different weapons, but also oh, what's the right word? Kind of that warrior's ethos, that comes out, and she becomes an important part of these young teenagers who've never been in combat or war, and helping pass on what she's been taught, like from Sun Tzu, and other warriors in the Japanese culture. So that becomes an important part of this. Do you have a comment or
So
question?
you have got it sounds like a really good amount of character development in your book here.
Yes. Hmm.
That is awesome. That is one of the things that I look for in a really good book, because I want to connect with the characters, and then especially if you're going to make it a series, then I can get hooked for a good lot of months.
Right. And I borrowed this a little bit from Gene Roddenberry, who I love to read in the Star Trek series everybody's familiar with. Each one of those characters, from Captain Kirk and Spock, and McCoy, their chemistry becomes so important that you learn a lot about each one. But when they come together as a team and the teamwork, it brings the experience, that they dwell on. They bring their strengths. So not everybody is exactly the same. In fact, what I do with a cruise is make sure everybody is completely different. And now in the second book, when we have a second saucer, there'll be 5 more. The captain, Zach's counterpart, is a young Navajo boy who's 15 and a half. He's Zach's age. His first name's Archer. So Archer Blue Jacket becomes a very important character in book 2, and he saves Zach's life, and so they become very close. But then you're also going to need another science officer, a chief engineer, a medical doctor, and a security officer. So these positions are on each of the ships, and we'll have a person from Earth, but from a different part of Earth, in each one of those. So the themes will follow from one book into the next and build. So each book 2 has 2 saucers, book 3 has 3, book 4 has 4, book 5 has 5. We never get all 7 because one of them, Miro, was lost with the city of Atlanta. So I won't spoil how that goes. Let's go into chapter 7. Did you have another comment or question,
No,
Becca?
I was just laughing. You said you're not going to spoil your book.
So you always have in the hero's journey, you have tests, you have allies, and you have enemies. And so the more loyal the allies, the better. The more serious the test, the consequences, the better. And the more evil the enemies, the better. So you want to try to go to extremes on each of those. And so the tests here, with the Centaurians coming in to invade Earth to take over all of our natural gas and oil and reserves, because they've depleted them on their planet. The consequences is humankind will be completely altered, or just completely ruined, or enslaved, to mine for oil and gas for this group of aliens. So the tests are the extreme. We can't fail. But their allies are deeply, deeply loyal, particularly the Pleiadians, and their enemies are just horrible, evil people and beings. So they have to go on orbit to Europa, which is one of the icy moons, or one of the moons of Jupiter. And we're learning a little bit more about the different characters, a little bit on the science part, particularly with crystals, energy lines. We're learning navigation with Orion. Everybody's familiar with the 3 star clusters of Orion, and that's Orion's belt. And if you imagine the archer, Orion, who has the bow and the arrow, and if the archer was to fire or let loose the arrow, it flies across the night sky and will strike the Taurus constellation. And the eye of Taurus is the Pleiades star cluster. So there's a tie in there. So we're teaching constellations, star patterns, recognitions as a navigational aid. All of those things that'll become so important in a space exploration. But the idea of let's not lose sight of what was behind us too. So the pyramids, particularly in Tikal, that are laid out in the configuration of the Pleiades, that's not an accident. Somebody intentionally chose to do that. And with the Fibonacci spiral being repeated throughout the universe, that's important. So we have our crew who ends up 5 teenagers approaching Europe, one of the mid-Gliadine moons of Jupiter. We have obviously one moon here on Earth. Everybody knows that. What is amazing is Jupiter, which is a huge, huge planet. It has 79 moons. And out of its 79 moons, the third closest to Jupiter, these are known moons, there may be more that we don't know about, is Europa. And Europa is believed to be the closest of the moons to be able to sustain life, advanced life, and closest to Earth-like as a moon. When I was growing up, everybody, thought you were crazy if you talked about life being, on another planet. One of the shifts has been in my lifetime is that we're realizing that it's not just the planets that might have life, particularly advanced life, but the moons are more likely, especially the icy moons or the moons that have ice on them. So it's not just the planets, but it's the moons of the planets that might have life that we need to search for. But when I grew up, if you talked about life possibly being on another planet or whatever, people would think you're crazy. Today, if you say, well, there's no life anywhere other than here on Earth, people think you're crazy. So in one lifetime, we've had a complete change, a paradigm shift where we've now completely accepted that there will be life found on other planets. No doubt. Even the Vatican has accepted that. The question is, will they be more advanced than us or less advanced? And to think we're the most advanced and most intelligent beings in the universe, I think is pretty arrogant. So as we're following the hero's journey, one of the things that the character or characters must do is approach their innermost cave. And that's introspection. It's what are your deepest fears? What are you most scared of? And we're all scared of the dark. We're scared of these big monsters, with gnashing teeth. So what becomes important is for Zach to overcome those fears, and he ends up confronting this monster, which they have to overcome. He's there alone, and Anzu, who was with him earlier, manages to wound this huge hairy Puckster. My dog, who's sitting right next to me in the chair, his name is Puck. For sports fans, it comes from he's a rescue dog, so but that comes from a hockey puck. But for you Shakespeareans, you'll recognize the character Puck, who's kind of an elfish kind of a character, Midsummer Night's Dream, and he's always getting in trouble and things, and that's a little closer what he's like. So I've built my dog in here, Puck, and the monster is a Puckster, so they're big, hairy, angry, beast-looking things. And so Zach is in a battle that he loses. He can't defeat the Puckster. He's about to give up, and he's wishing he had a gun. And now his grandfather, he has an image with his grandfather, who makes arrangements for his drum that White Elk made to be there in this cave. And Zach's, saying, oh, grandfather, I needed a gun. And instead, you've given me a drum. I needed a gun. You gave me a drum, and he remembers that, and he gets these words, play for him. And so he picks up the drumstick, and the only song he can think of at the moment as little drummer boy. So he starts tapping that out, and the Puckster, it resonates with the Puckster. The monster sits down, and so he doesn't get killed and eaten after all. And in fact, they end up taking one of the children of the Pucksters with them on their adventure. So now you, through the hero's journey, you come up with an ordeal. You always have to face this ordeal. And now they're on the Electra, the flying saucer. They're headed to into the Milky Way constellation. They have to now also confront another alien group of the reptilians. They're from M54 constellation, which exists. You can find that, and have to fly faster than light, FTL, where this is where time slows, and it opens a really fascinating discussion of whether or not man will ever be able to, humankind, I should include all the women in here, is whether or not we can withstand traveling faster than light, FTL. Some brilliant physicists say, no, we can't. One of my heroes is Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Some of you may be familiar with him. If you don't have this book in your collection, you really should make sure it's there, Becca. It was a New York Times bestseller. It's Neil deGrasse Tyson's Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, and it's a wonderful, quick read. Again, he's probably the most brilliant physicist of our time, and written many books. He is on record saying man will never fly faster than light. FTL is not physically possible. And but if you talk to other physicists, they'll say, well, we have to, otherwise we can never reach the stars. We have to fly faster than FTL. So that's an interesting discussion with the science part. And if so, well, then what will be the effects? And it's not dissimilar when we look back in time when man thought that we could never fly faster than the speed of sound. And what would happen when we hit the speed of sound? Would the aircraft just break apart and everybody die? And now we don't even think about it when we exceed the speed of sound. Let's see, is there anything? Oh, this is fascinating too. And I purposely don't push a lot of spiritual beliefs or Native American beliefs or Christian beliefs in any of my books. That's up to somebody, individually, your parents or your whoever, people, that's not my role. But what I do like to do is to bring in those themes, whether if it's something from the Bible that relates, that's a historical reference. In the King James Bible, this quote or this scripture stood out. It says, "Seek him who made the Pleiades and Orion and turns deep darkness morning and darkens the day into night, who calls."
Okay, so let's, I guess, pick up right before that quoting.
You got it. I was just finishing up this idea of this faster than light, which is extraordinarily interesting, and finishing up on what Zach Box and his crew must do is defeat the reptilians and survive one other encounter with the aliens, and now they're ready to go to the Pleiades constellation. When they arrive, the first thing they have to do is to go to the one-star mural in the constellation to Inspiration Point, and that's where they find their pyramid, and they have to explore the pyramid because that fits into White Elk's vision and is for this return to the Pleiades. And so the team explores the pyramid, this ancient pyramid on Cumorah, on Merope, and they find these 5 ancient technologies, to include the pearls of Pleiades, the belt of Orion, helm of darkness, ring of Odin, and wand of Circe. And those 4 actually exist when you look at ancient technologies. The helm of darkness, there was stories written about it 2,000 years ago where whoever wore that helmet would appear invisible to their enemy. So that is the theme on book 3. And the helm of darkness is a cloaking capability with the saucer and Zach's crew. So these are the names of the 5 books in the Saucer series. So it's Zach Box and the Pearls of Pleiades, Zach Box and the Belt of Orion, Helm of Darkness.
Oh,
So that's kind of the theme. So they all tie in to here.
nice.
Yeah, so it's kind of a neat setting of the stage for the next 4 books. And they'll all follow this hero's journey also. So there'll always be a road back, which is typical in that template or format. And so we learn more about Cadence and some of her passions, Zach with his dance and the regalia that he wears, and the gifts that they return with, and this need to search for these Einstein-Rosen bridge wormholes is what they're commonly known as, which allows us to go through the portals to visit these different star clusters. So that theoretically is what we'll be searching for humankind in as we advance to explore the stars. And so now everybody is returning home, and the last chapter in the hero's journey is always this return home with the elixir or whatever, the boon or whatever you receive. It could be just knowledge or wisdom. And so when they return, Zach's able to finally go to the Air Force Academy, and even though he's only 16, he's old enough now in Earth years, so he starts as a freshman, as does Anzu, and that's where book 2 starts, is when they're at the Air Force Academy. And one of the things that Zach was doing early was he was excited about getting his driver's license. Now he's 16, he can get a driver's license, and he was looking at new sports cars and Corvettes, and he learned to drive on his great-grandfather's old beat-up Chevy 49 Chevy 5-window pickup truck. So one of the things that happens while he's gone is his dad does a complete body off restoration, and so he has this his great-grandfather's old truck that he's rebuilt for him. And Bo, the puppy that was 6 months old when he left, is now 3 years old. And of course, he and Zach, take off, where they were right from the beginning. So they're still buddies. So that's kind of the 12 chapters in book 1 on Zach Box and the Pearls of Pleiades. And before I go on to the study guide real quick, Becca, do you have any questions or any comments that you want to insert?
No, I've been loving following along. I hope that everybody, as they're watching this, appreciate that you're sharing really how you're writing these books in the effort to kind of bring up some other authors.
Right.
And I think that that's awesome. And I'm really enjoying learning about the story, and I'm going to go grab your book.
Oh.
It's in the mail, so to speak.
Excellent. Now, this is, before we finish up, I just wanted to share the STEM, again, science, technology, engineering, and math study guide, but it's for both students and teachers. So this is the one for Zach Box and the Pearls of Pleiades. And then there's a short introduction. This is only 6 pages, so it goes pretty quick. And there's a section here for the students. So I, as a writer, as the author, am asking the students, have you ever considered a career in space? And if so, then this book was really written for you and in mind. And that comes from the heart, because I was really trying to envision a young woman, teenager, boy, girl, who's sitting around thinking, well, I don't know what I want to do with my life, and they may never have thought about a career in the space industry, aerospace, and so this kind of says, well, this might be something for you to think about, and so it kind of sets up the series and the books. And then for teachers, this is really important for them. So it's a message from me as the author to a teacher, and my youngest daughter, Lainey, is a 7th grade teacher, so I had her help me write this one short paragraph. So this is to serve as a curriculum, so they don't have to come up with a new curriculum. This is their
that is amazing. What a great idea.
Yeah, and she helped me write this, so it should be acceptable in most middle school, high schools. So it's to teach STEM, the cross-discipline units of study for grades 8 through 12. Although, again, I think if you have a really bright boy or girl who's, 6th grade, 7th grade, they probably could enjoy the book too. For teachers, again, I think really the target group, and Lainey showed me, my daughter showed me this, she actually did it for me. You can take the book, you're probably aware of this, Becca, since you're a librarian, but you don't put the entire book, you just take different paragraphs from different sections and you run it through this Lextile software program, and it gives you a target level for what grades. And so when we did that on the Zach Box book, it came in with the Lextile level target for grades 10 through 12. But again, I think as a teacher, if you've got a really high achieving 9-year-old, ninth grader, they're going to be fine with this too. And each of the books is intended to be sequential. And at the end of each chapter, ideally, the student would have in hand the study guide, so that when they finish the chapter, or if they're really on top of it, they may read the 3 bullet points for that chapter ahead of time. So when they come to the answer, they could just, jot it down or whatever. So each book has 3 objectives for each chapter. There's 12 chapters in each of the 5 books. So that'd be 180 learning objectives. So there's a lot of core content here, again, cross disciplines through the science, technology, engineering, and math. And when we authored this, it was intended to be a good extension for summer reading programs. But again, as you and I talked at the very beginning, with COVID and concerns now, and so many people learning on their own and studying on their own, I don't think you have to wait for a summer program. I think this could be acceptable now, in most curricula. So just giving people just a quick glimpse at the 3 bullets in each of the chapter. So each chapter has a heading and the core content and STEM discussion points. So again, this could be an online discussion with a teacher or facilitator or a group of students. It depends on how they want to set it up. And it teaches you a little bit of different cultures. So for example, begin with talking about, how do you say hello, hi, how are you in the Ute language? And so you have to look, so it's not hardcore science, technology, engineering, math, but there will be some of that will challenge you. And then just to get people thinking about space, and you know this, Becca, from your former role in the DoD, if it weren't for satellite, in many cases, we wouldn't be able to communicate with our cell phones, and they even helped with credit card transactions and remote. So if we lost our satellite and our space capabilities, we would be set back technologically. And that's what in this book, the aliens are looking, the concern is they'll take out our space-based capabilities, and now we'll have to fight against them in technology. That was from 20 or 30 years ago, before we really had developed those technologies. So it gives you a chance to kind of look back, see where we are, and look forward, when it comes to space and the adaptation of space and space capabilities. And I won't go through each one of these. I'll just give you a couple more highlights out of a couple chapters. So it gives you a sense of, in asking the questions, what does GPS stand for? And how is it used for navigation? So students can, research that. And then, so GPS would be easy to find, but the important part is, well, then how is it used in navigation? And we talk a little bit more about the Fibonacci sequence. We talk about Neil deGrasse Tyson. Why is he famous? What's he known for? We talk a little bit about Greek literature. Well, I mentioned again the hero with 1,000 faces, and we talked about this as it came up, the miraculous staircase in Santa Fe. And let's see, let me do 1 or 2 more. Let's see, for people interested in being pilots, especially fighter pilots or drone pilots that might be used in combat, the OODA loop is something that was developed, I think it was World War II, by fighter pilots, but it sets some principles for engaging either unmanned or manned aerial platforms in combat, which could also be applied, and that's what Zach does to defeat one of the alien commanders in his battle. And then we talk a little bit about the Einstein-Rosen bridge. Albert Einstein is the one who first suggested with Dr. Rosen the idea that there could be this portal to allow us to bend time and space, that it's a fabric that could be bent, and really does create an entire new paradigm when we're talking about space travel. So instead of going from point A to point B, you make that jump between those two portals almost instantaneously. And let's see, let me just do one more here at the end. And the question is, so each one of these is a question. So at the end of the 12th chapter, at the end, the question is, what did Zach Box find hidden inside his great-grandfather's flute? So this is a wooden flute for playing the Indian music that Zach grew up with, listened to his great-grandfather. But inside was a small scrap of paper, and that's what helped set up book 2. This last page on the study guide, I just wanted to point out 3 websites. We won't go on to them now, but NASA has
Those are good sites. I know those sites.
yeah. So, and if you're watching this and you have, and especially if you're fascinated as I am with space and in particular space travel, the NASA STEM engagement, that link will be of interest. The Space Foundation, that's headquartered here in Colorado Springs, which is where we were going to do the launch for the Zach Box, or Zach Box book, excuse me. And with this COVID, it's been closed down, so we haven't been able to do it. So hopefully it'll come up, next year, and we'll be able to have a nice event there at the Space Foundation in Colorado Springs and do a book signing or something. And then the last one I wanted to point out, and this one, Becca, you're probably very familiar with, is with the Department of Education, STEM. So if you just go on www.ed.gov, there's a whole, just a tremendous amount of information on STEM, and depending on what level and interest in the teachers' interest. So it closes out the end of this paragraph with this image, which is one of my favorite images. This is from the NASA Hubble Space Telescope, the HST, and this is the Meissner 160 spiral galaxy with the NGC 4258. So it's a cataloging number to locate the constellation. I just think it's just so fascinating to me looking at these space images through the Hubble or any of our advanced space telescopes, because when I was growing up, I kind of had this misperception that space is just this big black emptiness with a couple of white dots that are stars. But as we can see, it's anything but. There's just some just beautiful, beautiful, magnificent colors. And again, when you start studying the spiral galaxies and measuring them, you realize, wait a minute, these are based upon the Fibonacci spiral. So it just kind of comes back to the very beginning. And I just wanted to close out by giving my email address, www.jwander.com. So just, that's my web address, jwander.com. So if anybody's interested in contacting me or hearing any more, just shoot me an email. I should give you my email address too. It's my initials, jwa122@comcast.net. So if somebody wants a copy of the STEM study guide, again, Becca has it, or shoot me an email. Again, it's free. It's not copyrighted intentionally, so it can be freely shared. So I hope you enjoyed that. Becca, do you have any closing comments?
Well, and just in case anybody didn't write that down, I will put your website and your email on the description when I put this onto YouTube.
Great.
And so, yeah, if people get your book, maybe they get a whole, a couple of them and do a book club with this as, some teenagers working through this. They can contact us at the library, Pines and Plains Library. We will have your study guide. You have your study guide. This is amazing. It's a great tool to get kids interested. You've got fast cars and trucks. You've got, a boy and his loyal dog. You've got all elements, and I really appreciate walking through the storyboard, the outline of how you put it all together. That was cool. That was very cool.
I hope people find it useful. And if you have that book burning inside you, it's one way to help bring it out and share it with the world. So good luck with everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And we will probably meet with you again
I
because
just
I gotta admit, it's fun talking to you. You've got a Shakespeare book coming up,
I just enjoy this. I've got a couple of
or not Shakespeare, Sherlock Holmes. I'm sorry.
Sherlock Holmes stuff, and I've got two books on Sheriff Kelly. I was the
Oh yeah.
26th sheriff of El Paso County, and Rankin Scott Kelly was our first sheriff. So I've written a nonfiction based upon his life and times, and then I've written a historical fiction. So maybe next time we'll talk about those two books.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. Sounds very great. Well, I'm glad we got a chance to talk, and I'll get these all wrapped up and loaded up onto YouTube, and hopefully people go to Amazon. Most of your books are on Amazon.
Correct.
There's two books that they have to email you to get because those are through a different publisher.
That's correct. But after the first of the year, I'm changing publisher. So I'm hoping by the end of February that by then, 7 of my books will be available on Amazon for retail, but also for other books, libraries, let's see, like school libraries. They as you know, with the Pines and Plains Library, you can order direct through Ingram, is who's
Mhm.
my distribution, and get a deep discount. So you can get, that really helps for nonprofits and for libraries and schools.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much. We will hopefully get people checking out your book, and we will once they sample your words, we'll send them on to Amazon, and they can stock their shelves.
Great.
So
Enjoy,
very.
everyone. Thank you for doing it.
All right. Well, I'm gonna let you go, and we will wrap this up.
Very good.